grafts. This is our thief, right? We won't mention the embezzlement of public resources while at it. Now, this subject of ethics continues to elicit sharp reactions in the Kenyan society. Kenyans largely know what they ought to do, but they fail or completely neglect to do that which they ought to do, or sadly don't care about the wrongdoing of others. Now, the quest for an ethical Kenyan society remains a journey that has been characterized by many false starts, hits and misses, and, quoting Justice Aaron Ringera, the impunity in the public service is largely a reflection of the larger societal moral decadence in a country whose people stand for nothing. End of quote. Think about that for a second and consider these two scenarios. These two bills currently proposed at the National Assembly. These two bills seek to repeal critical provisions of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 2003. The first bill, which is sponsored by the Honorable Member from Bere North, Geoffrey Kiringa, seeks to substitute criminal prosecution for corruption offenses arising from procurement flaws with administrative sanctions. Now, 80% of Kenya's corruption is procurement originated, related, and perhaps even executed. The second bill, sponsored by the Honorable Member for Homa Bay, Peter Kaluma, seeks to repeal the legal provisions that prohibits corruption convicts from appointment to public office. In essence, he says, don't punish anyone caught and convicted in corruption, reward them with public office. So it's a conundrum, and I wonder why citizens condone this. But again, perhaps we as Kenyans may largely hate corruption and its consequences, but we are guilty of embracing, defending, and standing in solidarity of persons violating our public trust. Let's take a look at this clip that happened last week. A member of parliament, in his, well, Member of Parliament behavior. Let's take a look to set the stage for tonight's show.
Make a call. I'm not here to talk with you guys. Make a simu lori kuje. Call. Make a call. I'm not here to talk with you guys. Make a simu lori kuje. Call. Make a call. I'm not here to talk with you guys. Make a simu lori kuje.
All right, in the studio, I'm joined with Madam Dr. Monica Mwiru, ESCC Vice Chair. Karibu sana to the program.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Let's talk tonight, like, brief comments about where would you think this country is in terms of us trying to achieve these sort of ethical standards and this elusive Chapter 6. Where are we?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to have a discussion on the status of corruption in Kenya. Today, we are commemorating the African Anti-Corruption Day. The day is the brainchild of AU, and the member states of AU adopted the Africa Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. And to date, 48 countries have ratified this convention. Kenya is one of those countries. Mm-hmm. So,
where would you say we are? If you look at, so in relative terms, 7 years later, where do you think we are?
Let me first of all give a background of ESCC. ESCC is the lead agency in the fight against corruption. And ESCC has the mandate to prevent and combat corruption and ethical practices. I would say that ESCC, we have achieved a lot. And we are proud of our achievement. As I said, we have the mandate of preventing and enforcement. I'll start with preventing, because sometimes it's good to prevent
before it goes.
Before.
Yeah. Absolutely. Prevention is better than cure. Yes.
So in the prevention area, we have conducted what we call systems reviews in ministries, and we in the system reviews, we identify areas where there are loopholes of loss of public funds. We have conducted corruption risk assessments in over 70 ministries, departments, and agencies, and 27 county governments. We have also established a National Integrity Academy to empower the public and public officers on issues regarding ethics, corruption, and competency in preventing and combating corruption. Mm-hmm. Allow me now to go on to the enforcement mandate of EACC. And now I'll be referring to the strategic plan period, which started in 2018 and ended on June 30th this year. And during that 5-year period, we are proud of the following milestones. We have had a total of 721 files on corruption, mm-hmm. economic crimes, and unethical conduct, which were forwarded to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. And out of these, the Commission recommended 496 of prosecution and 70 for administrative and other actions.
Right.
The other element of enforcement is tracing illegally acquired public assets. We have traced public assets worth 44.3 billion. That has been stolen from public and filed recovery cases in the court. Mm-hmm. That is we trace. Then, during this period, tracing is just identifying, and we say that Mr. Smart has this wealth, which does not match his legal sources of income. So out of those 44.3 billion, we have recovered assets worth 23.84 billion, and mm-hmm. these assets have been returned to the public. Further, EACC is pursuing forfeiture of corruptly acquired assets worth 42 billion Kenya shillings, which are pending before court across the country.
This is interesting statistics, and I want us to go through them, bits and pieces. But just to give this context, getting 23 billion back that has been stolen from the public, it's not a mean feat, right? That's happened in a period of 5 years,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
What would you say? What does that tell you or tell us about the state of affairs? If this is just a tip of the iceberg.
True. It is a tip of the iceberg. It tells us that there's a lot of corruption out there, and there's a lot of public funds and assets which are lost through corruption. And if you can allow me, even I can go deeper and tell you exactly what we have recovered. And the key is, I have said, we have returned these assets back to the public. For example,
I want to come to that, Dr. Monica, but I want to take a short break. Short break, yeah? Okay. Yes, we'll come back. I want to go back to that detail and drilling down to exactly what the EACC is managing to get. And we have some examples of that. We'll show you that. Don't go too far. All right, with all respect, welcome back. It's the 7th annual celebrations of Anti-Corruption Day in the continent. I do have Dr. Monica Mwero with me. in studio, and we want to drill down on this question of how ethical this country can be, the questions of corruption. Why do we still tend to steal a lot more than, preserve what is good for all of us? Dr. Monica, you're making a point on the matters that EACC has managed to, sort of gotten back. Talk to me about land. Land is a big thing, and we sort of seem not to keep our hands away from lands. EACC has some lands that you have recovered?
Yes. Actually, land is a big issue with Kenyans. We love land. However, we should keep our hands off public land because most of this land is reserved for public good. For example, for schools, for hospitals, for roads, and so on and so forth. At EACC, as I mentioned earlier, we have recovered land belonging to the public. A notable example is land measuring 56 acres belonging to the Meteorological Department located in industrial area, and this land is valued at 5.2 billion. This land is currently being used for public benefit. EACC recovered and returned it to the government, and currently it is being used for public benefit for a government project. Another notable recovery is Naivasha Karo land measuring 227.9 hectares worth 800 million Kenya shillings. Surprisingly, we recovered the land belonging to the High Court in Kisumu. Imagine that.
Who had taken that land? Do we know?
Let me just say that we recovered, and that land is worth 1 billion. Mm-hmm. It has reverted back to the government, and it is being used for its rightful purpose. That is where the High Court of Kisumu stands. We have also recovered the land in Eldoret belonging to the county government of Uasin-Gishu and the National Police Service, valued at 1.9 billion. Another recovery is a recovery of public land where Hobry Estate in Buxton area in Mombasa, mm-hmm, valued at 398 million. You can see that is, just as you said, it is just the tip of an iceberg.
Right.
And we still have other recovery cases before court.
Shall we talk more briefly now about the state of our affairs, state of mind, as the organization that we essentially equip you with, sort of the public trust to deal with these questions of ethics, in a way morality, and you gauge these things. Before we had the SEC and now, yes, where would you say we are as a people?
As a people, I would say that we are at a better place because we have started the journey. Fighting corruption is a journey. And what I can see is that we are making small but sure steps forward. We are not moving backwards. So we can give Kenyans hope that EACC, and it is not EACC alone. Allow me to talk about stakeholders who help us or who can help in this fight against corruption. First, I want to talk about state actors. State actors, I will talk about the executive. We would like the executive to empower all institutions which are mandated to fight corruption. Two, the judiciary. The judiciary is a strong partner in this fight against corruption. And I can say that the judiciary has been very instrumental in helping us attain these milestones I've just talked earlier. The other stakeholders are, I can talk about faith-based organizations. Before I talk about a faith-based organization, let me tell you that corruption is ingrained in Kenya because our moral fabric is in tatters.
What's the cause of that?
That is where I'm going. It is because we have lost our values, our morals, and therefore this is where now the faith-based organizations can help in this fight, inculcating values, keeping on reminding people about integrity, about honesty, and we have to keep on reminding them. I'll put an analogy of an imam or a preacher. They have to keep on reminding their followers about the evils of the society. And they will remind them today, and tomorrow they will forget. And so we have to keep on sensitizing and reminding Kenyans about the dangers of corruption, the decay in moral values. The other actors who can help in this fight is the family unit. These days, parenting has been left to TV and gadgets. Let's go back to inculcating values in our children, and we read by example. As parents, let us inculcate those values.
Let me be devil's advocate for a second.
Yes.
I was looking at the speech done earlier by Justice Aaron Ringara, Just Emeritus of the East African Court and the Court of Appeal. And the speech today, particularly that caught my attention when we spoke about the Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which seems to be an inside joke between the drafters of the Constitution and Kenyans. Yes. Everyone in between, the actors are talking about, don't seem to care or don't seem to think that Chapter 6 is a thing. Like for 10 years, we've done everything to remove and claw back on the Chapter 6. And I quote him, he says, the objective of Chapter 6 of the Constitution was to insulate public trust from abuse by ensuring that persons appointed or elected to state and public offices met the prescribed moral, ethical, and integrity requirements. However, that hasn't happened 10 years later.
Yes.
Where do you think is this sort of break between us agreeing and thinking that this morality is a thing that we must do, and then actualizing, you know, what is in the papers, what is in the books? What's this gap that we have?
First of all, I would say that the framers of the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, they knew that the issue of integrity is key in a well-functioning society. And that is why they reserved a whole chapter, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, on the issue of leadership and integrity. And this chapter kind of gives leaders a guide on how to conduct themselves in a professional manner, whether in public or in private. However, there's a problem in this chapter because there's a weak legal framework to enforce this chapter. And also, as the society, this public apathy. The citizens, they do not care about integrity, especially when voting readers. If you can remember, during the last general elections, EACC flagged some readers who had integrity deficits. However, some of these readers, they are in office today. The reason why I'm saying there's a gap in the legal framework is because anybody has a right, even if you have an issue with integrity or if you have an issue in court, the law allows you to exhaust all legal avenues.
Yes.
And therefore,
until you complete.
Until you complete.
Yes.
So as EACC, we do our part in integrity issues, but we have to act within the confines of the law.
So there's an obvious disconnect between that, but the next question is always the personal responsibility, which you spoke about in a moment, and I'll bring the question of professional bodies, the lawyers, engineers, doctors, auditors, accountants, and the rest of it. There's no corruption that has happened without professionals.
Yes.
Without professional bodies.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
These people don't need education. So what's the breakage in that? Why are we sort of still having the same, and what's the missing link, and how do we address it?
True. Most corruption issues, they involve professionals. Here, professionals, we are talking about accountants, we are talking about lawyers, we are talking about quantity surveyors, engineers, and many other professionals who are supposed to use their knowledge for public good. For example, as a civil engineer or as a quantity surveyor, you're supposed to make sure that if, for example, is a building, it follows the right avenues, the right way of constructing that building. But what has happened, we have seen buildings collapsing. We have seen roads which after a few days they have potholes, and therefore these professionals are not using their knowledge for public good. Also professional bodies. Now I've talked about professionals. Also let me talk about accountants. There's a lot of loss of public funds.
Right.
And sometimes these funds are lost through some of these accountants aiding in the process. Also, let me talk about procurement, which sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, 80% of cases involve procurement issues. And therefore, the professionals, they have a responsibility to ensure that they guide or they act with integrity. And also the professional bodies, they are supposed to whip their members and act so that the members can do not taint the image of that profession.
But that's still happening. Actually, if you're to be honest, that's still happening.
It is happening, but there's hope. And that is why, like, we are here today to sensitize, to ask people to reflect. Actually, this is something I wanted to point out earlier. This day is about reflection. EACC to reflect about its achievements, its challenges, and the way forward. Also, as the citizens, and it includes everybody, you and me, to reflect, what are you doing about corruption? The word corruption is mentioned every day, But what are we doing? Mr. Smart, what are you doing about corruption?
I have you on the show, so I'm doing my bit. But
so, the thing is, we should, as citizens, take up, we should not be bystander and just complain. We should act.
Let me ask one final question before I go for our next break. Supposing the reality that we have is people getting into stealing public resources, getting rich. We know of governors who went into office one term and all of a sudden they are billionaires, you know, with helicopters, owning homes from here to heaven. But we know the source of this money.
Yes.
Every evidence in public
Yes.
is that corruption is rampant.
Yes.
How do we dissuade and tell everyone else that don't be corrupt? Well, all evidence is everyone is stealing.
The way I can look at that issue is we should make corruption painful. People are corrupt because of greed. They want to amass and have palatial homes, big cars. How can we make corruption painful? That is why I talked about asset recovery. You see, in enforcement, there are it is two-pronged. We can pursue the criminal angle, and we can pursue the civil angle. The criminal angle is where now the court decides to either to put you in jail or not. And when they put you in jail, you can be put in jail for five years, but you had amassed billions and billions of shillings. So once you finish your term, you'll come back and enjoy your billions of shillings. So this other angle of asset recovery, we are inflicting some pain. Sometimes you have to inflict some pain, and we are taking back these assets. How can the citizens help us in this fight?
Let's come to that. We're going to take a short break. Dr. Monica Moiro, how can citizens help? I'll come with your questions as well on social media. How do you think you can help? Is fighting corruption really a gone course? And we should just all accept and say, well, corruption is one. With all due respect, don't go too far.
Mara aliko liencha ngakora kweli kweli bunga alinga kora nkalikio musuli kagenda ngakora my friend bali bande balinga sina kibakoba abandi ngabatuma ngumbu bali bamuyinali kina mbachene jikatira ababo isiko abande ngabagekora nganya kitali bali bayireke no musuli lakini ni vitu vyeto gabi mimi ndio nasimamia catering ya wao wabunge wote kwa catering committee kule bungeni. Na nilisema tu niliita wabunge wa opposition nikawaweka kwa catering hapo kwa jikoni mahali kuna mess yetu, nikanunua supu tukakunywa supu ya malenge, supu ya sasa. Nyinyi mkaenda mkageuza mkasema nilisema supu ni inamaanisha pesa. Waacheni unafiki bwana. Wabunge wanakunywa supu pia ama namna gani?
All right, with all respect, you're watching WDR. Well, that is a matter of public debate, raging public debate, and evidence really, if you like, of the ethics, you know, of political leaders, that someone can stand in public and say one thing on camera, on video, and the next day say completely another thing and walk away like nothing has happened. Evidence of the kind of leadership that we have today. Dr. Monica Mwiro, would you care to react?
What I can say is, as I said, we have, as a society, we have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, what are we, especially the readers, what are we communicating to the young people who are looking up to us? When I appear in public and I say, and I utter a word, and then the following day, I change the narrative. What am I communicating? What I can say is that as readers, and here I'm talking about anybody who has influence over people, let us act with integrity in an honest way so that it can cascade down to the young minds and they grow up with honesty and integrity. Allow me to quote one of the countries where people normally cite, Singapore. I understand that 50 years ago, Singapore and Kenya were at par. What changed Singapore? Lee Kuan Yew, the president of Singapore, came up with a model where he inculcated honesty in that country. Honesty and integrity. So what I'm trying to say, and today Singapore is a developed country. What I'm trying to say, the tones should be set at the top. The readers should actually call a meeting between I and I alone, myself and I, and ask yourself, what message am I conveying to the young minds and the citizens in general? Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we seem to follow that. But I want to bring another question on the wealth declaration by all public officials. It's, I think, that's a concept that, again, on paper, it's Kenyans wanted this because everyone knows why we want our leaders to tell us how much they're worth before they go for office, during and afterwards. But for whatever reason, we found a good way of saying that this is all private, and wealth declaration then is just sort of an academic exercise.
Yes.
How do we solve that?
Thank you for that question. The good news is that there is a bill in Parliament, a conflict of interest bill, which is, I believe, is at an advanced stage. And they are proposing that the wealth declaration, actually it is declaration of assets, liabilities, and assets and liabilities, to be domiciled at EACC. If the wealth declaration is domiciled in EACC and EACC is empowered, here I would say that we are given more resources, we'll be able to analyze that data. We'll be able to analyze and compare the anomalies in the wealth declaration forms. If we check what you declared, for example, this year and 2 years down the line, you declared that you had 2 million worth of assets, and then in 2 years, you have $1 billion worth of assets, and yet we know that your legitimate income is about 150,000. Then we put a question mark. so we can be able to follow up, again, within the law.
Would this, just to take this discussion, the next question is, the people who work in government also have this sort of legitimate business interest to work with government. Isn't just there a misnomer that either I work for government and I fully, wholly relinquish all business interest with government, or, you know, we don't have, we say everyone can do whatever they want, because that seems to be where it all stems, that people who work in government still can do business with government and say, I do business with government.
As long as the business does not conflict, it does not conflict with your, for example, if I'm dealing with land, and then I start a land buying company, there's a conflict there. So as long as it's not conflicting, then you can do business. And when I talk about legitimate sources of income, I'm talking about, for example, your salary, and it is not income from illegal sources.
Right.
And you know, there are many sources of illegal income.
Okay. Let's go to the final points. The gaps in anti-corruption legal framework, which you've made mention to, and the bills that sort of are seeking to remove, like the two bills that I mentioned, one from Homa Bay that seeks to repeal provisions prohibiting corruption convicts, the one from Beare North, which seeks to substitute criminal prosecution for corruption offenses arising from procurement flaws. What's the general feeling towards this? What does the EACC feel towards, you know, sort of these new legal frameworks as you work very hard to try and consolidate and sort of strengthen the legal framework that you currently operate in?
Oh, thank you. When we talk about the legal framework, I mentioned about the Chapter 6. Sometimes it is very hard to come up with evidence about unethical behavior. So we need to tighten the legal, the laws where it can help us enforce Chapter 6. Now, about the two bills, one in regard to procurement, and the other one in regard to provision about somebody who has been convicted, the argument that they have served and then he's not allowed to serve, it is about double jeopardy. I don't believe so, because even in other countries, once you are convicted, leave alone convicted, once your name is mentioned, in other countries they step down. So, advocating that we delete Section 45 B and C of ASECA will weaken procurement law, and most cases EACC handles that section really assists in securing conviction. Deleting the section about conviction, it is sending a negative signal in this fight, whereby it's saying that it's okay, you'll be convicted, and then you just come back. Is Kenya short of qualified people to work in our institutions?
It appears. That's the import. That's the import of this argument.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's wind down with this simple question, and I think everyone, I've seen some people ask that on social media, that what are these successes for EACC that has had, done with the last 5 years, with your charter, starting a new one, what is a few things that you can mention and say these are very indicative things that as EACC we've managed to do? We've managed either to return the public trust, we are managing to return money, which you've mentioned before. What are those sort of things that you'd say as you move on to the next charter in the next 5 years that EACC has done, and what would you expect from you?
Thank you. Actually, I have really talked of our successes. Asset recovery is top on the chart, and we will continue with the enhancing asset tracing and recovery. We are also enhancing public education and awareness. Because sometimes people are not aware of their rights, because here is an issue of rights. You have a right to basic needs, rights to good sanitation, rights to housing, rights to good medical care, rights, all those. But when money is, public funds are not spent in the right way, then citizens are denied those rights. So we will enhance our public education and awareness. The other strategy, and actually allow me to address the strategies which, as EACC, we are laying for the next strategic plan. I've talked about asset tracing and asset recovery. We also want to direct our efforts and resources in the area of high impact investigations. When I talk about high impact investigations, this is where we, I don't want to use the word target, where we look at the personalities involved, whether it is an issue to deal with the public interest. For example, when somebody takes land which belongs to a school or a hospital, even if it is an acre, that is of public interest. So we'll pursue that. The other strategy we want to focus on is partnerships and collaborations. As I said earlier, this war cannot be won by EACC alone. EACC has a staff complement of about 700 against a population of Kenya of 50 million, and therefore EACC alone cannot be able to win this war. So that is why we want to partner with like-minded agencies, both local and international. This will also help us enhance our capacity, our human resource, and so on. And lastly, we want to embark on research. Okay.
Final thing, picking from Justice Emerita's presentation today, and I found that interesting, annual publication of a list of shame. That will be interesting.
Yes, that will be interesting. I would say I agree with him, but we also want to have, I would say that we need to have a list of those people. Instead of glorifying those who are embezzling public funds, why can't we have a list of people who have upheld integrity in our country, and let those people be the role model.
So you have two lists.
To our children and to our youth.
Right.
Yes.
Final thoughts?
My final thoughts is I want to address all Kenyans. as I said earlier, we are always talking about corruption. But I want to say that be the change you want to see. Raise your voice against corruption. And if we do our part, we will win this war. Let me say that Kenya has won many battles. We won the battle against the colonialists. We won the battle against the single-party rule. And we managed to secure a progressive constitution. Therefore, Kenyans and Africans at large, we can win this war. It is the small things, the little things citizens do that will make a difference. That is according to Wangari Maathai. Thank you.
Very well said. Dr. Monica Mwero, Vice Chairperson EC, thank you very much for your thoughts tonight. Looking forward to sit with you again and again and looking at these things and finding out if you're winning this battle and be as optimistic as you are. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. That does it for us, with all due respect. We do this every Tuesday. See you again next week, Tuesday, same time, on this station. My name is James Mark. Please have a lovely night.